afternoon and welcome to this webinar. So, funded by the European Commission, PhotonHub Europe seeks to boost the competitiveness and uptake of photonics technologies across Europe. And so if you are a company innovating in photonics and you would be interested in either grant funding or technical support, business and investment readiness coaching support or training or access to advanced research centers focused on technologies, you should get in touch with PhotonHub. So the sessions we do with PhotonHub provide beneficiaries with a platform to pitch their ideas and connect directly with potential investors. It can be an incredible opportunity to showcase your vision and secure the funding your business deserves. So get in touch with PhotonHub if you are in this situation. Today, I'm lucky to welcome Jan-Wille Hoste, who is the co-founder and director of Meep. And so we are going to talk about photonics and health. So Jan-Wille, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I'll probably start by asking you to introduce yourself and share some details about your educational and professional background prior to Meep.
All right, thanks. Hey Bernard, nice that you could have me. So I'm Jan-Wille. I'm as you said, I'm the co-founder and the director of Meep. I've been in the innovation scene, let's say, in diagnostics, medtech, and photonics for about 10 years. I have a background as a photonics engineer, so I did a PhD on integrated photonics. And then afterwards, I entered the venturing track. I founded a first startup, Antelope Diagnostics, and then recently founded a second one, Meep, both of them based on photonic sensing for healthcare.
So what's the health issue we are going to discuss today? The main one.
The main one we're going to talk about is sexually transmittable diseases. And then more specifically, we make a test for chlamydia and gonorrhea as two STDs, but many of the things we talk about are general for STDs.
So what are the current estimates when it comes to percentages of the population which can be affected by these diseases? So I know it depends from one country to another. Can you give us maybe one or two examples?
Yeah, just in general, you can imagine that in the sexually active young population, so let's say between 15 and 35, we are roughly talking about one in 20 that is infected for chlamydia, so around 5%. In the UK,
so that's for so that's for Belgium, I guess.
Yeah, that's for Belgium. That's for Europe in general. That's for US. Okay. Some parts in US have 10%. In the UK, it's also 10%. So there are places where it's higher, places where it's lower, but on average, this is more or less the number.
Okay, so somewhere between 5 and 10%, but that's huge.
Yeah, that's pretty huge.
What do we know about the proportion of these people who are asymptomatic, so which are not aware that they have an STD?
Yeah, that's where the real problem is. Around 70%, 75, 70 to 80, let's say, of women are asymptomatic. With men, it's a bit lower. It's more like 1 in 2. But so most women are asymptomatic for chlamydia, which of course leads to a problem situation where people might be infected, but they don't know about it, and then they spread the disease, leading to these high prevalences.
But what do we know about the number of people who ask for an appointment with a doctor and get a treatment. So do all the people who are symptomatic ask for an appointment with a doctor or not?
I think so. Let's say in general, we only have testing rates. So people who get tested, let's say for this, between 10 and 15%. So quite low. Now, please keep in mind, most of the people are asymptomatic. We do think that people who are symptomatic have a higher testing rate if you have symptoms. So part of that is, of course, due to the fact that it's largely asymptomatic.
And so why is it important to be aware whether you have a STD or not? So what are the consequences?
Yeah, so of course, if you don't know, you might spread the disease and you increase prevalence, right? Specifically for women, the clinical consequences are quite severe. So in chlamydia infection can lead to an inflammation of the female reproductive system. And this can accumulate over time. As you can imagine, people get infected, they don't know, you have inflammation. If it's in the fallopian tubes, then it can get blocked, and then it can lead to infertility. So you have a setting where people want to have kids later on, and then it's possible that the doctor says you are not fertile due to a previously untreated chlamydia infection 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago.
And for women which end up in this kind of situation, is there a cure?
At that point, well, the cure, once you have that specific infertility, the cure is there's no cure. There is a solution in the sense of IVF. So then you're talking about in vitro fertilization, but the natural pregnancy is at that point no longer possible. You have other clinical consequences like chronic pelvic pain, etc. But so yeah, once it's heavily inflamed and the damage has been done, it's pretty difficult to still cure it. So we see that if we look at IVF treatments and it's due to and it's a female cause, then more than half are due to this blockage of the fallopian tube. So it's really a high percentage that is infected. Yeah.
And so for the ones who are able to find out early that they have an STD, what's the treatment?
Yeah, so just as a very simple antibiotic. So it's one pill and you
one pill for 10 days and you're done.
Yes, something like that. It's a simple antibiotic and then it's gone. So it's really surprising. We have a super good cure. The only thing we don't have is people getting tested. And actually people know, of course, they had unsafe sex. The problem is not that they're unaware. The problem is that they just don't want to go to the GP because they feel they don't like that experience.
Okay. So, but let's assume people goes to a general practitioner and ask for a test. So how do these tests currently work? What are the kind of machines which are needed to achieve this sort of test?
So specifically for these pathogens or these infectious diseases, we're talking about PCR tests. So those are amplification tests for nucleic acids for DNA. And so those are expensive machines.
Sorry. Yes, sorry. Basically, these are the same technologies used for the detection of COVID.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So that's the same. So those are like large analyzers you find in the labs. I think between 20,000 and a few 10,000s of euros. Obviously, a consumer cannot use this at home.
Yeah.
Right?
So why are these machines so expensive? So I guess it's linked to the technologies which are embedded in these machines.
Yeah, you have to imagine if you want to do a PCR, you need to get to the DNA. So you have a sample, a vaginal swab or a urine sample. You need to find first the pathogen, break it open, get the DNA, find the correct sequence, amplify it, and then detect it with fluorescence technology. So there's a lot of liquid handling and chemical steps, and then there's the detection step. So in that sense, it's quite a complex engineering machine.
Okay. So let's move to Meep and the origins of Meep. So what's been the journey which led you to the idea of Meep, which, if I understood properly, in a nutshell, is applying to photonics to the detection of STD. How did you come up with this idea?
So it started in 2016, and the technology is actually broader. Basically, we have a mini lab that can do any test that you find in the lab. We can port it to our mini lab and then decrease the costs a factor 500 and bring it to patients. But then so it's like a technology push. We initially we thought, okay, what are we gonna do with this? Typically these machines are used for doctors. Actually, almost all testing is used by doctors or by labs, as we just talked about. But back at that time, I think we really thought, okay, the democratization of so many technologies and services is going on, right? You have people booking hotels at that moment via Airbnb instead of via a normal hotel chain. You have your banking app. You have your banking on your app. You don't need to go to the banking office anymore. So you have all these services going direct to consumer. We thought, okay, what about self-testing? What about diagnostic testing? It would be nice if we could do more testing at home, and so relieve some of the pressure on the healthcare system, because the healthcare system is too pressurized, basically. And that then led us to think, okay, what is a good case for home testing? And then we saw these numbers on the STDs, these high prevalences, the good therapy, but no testing because people are too embarrassed. And then that just made a lot of sense to focus on this initially.
But so when you started studying photonics, I guess you were working exclusively on the technological side, and you have no specific interest in health, maybe, or did that interest for the health of people emerge early in your career, or did it come just once you created Meep?
Well, I was always interested in healthcare before I did photonics. I come from a family of doctors, so there's a lot of clinicians, and my mother is an orthodontist, my father's a doctor, etc. So I was always doubting whether to go for medical school or engineering school, and then really last moments I chose for engineering, but it was always a tough choice, and so now I'm kind of happy that I can work on the technology that is useful in the healthcare setting.
Yeah, but when you started working on photonics, where was the technology? What sort of topics were you working on in photonics when you were a PhD student?
You mean in a healthcare, in a sensing setting, or?
No. When you start, so you at some stage you did your PhD in photonics.
Yeah, indeed.
So what were the topics you were working on at that time? You remember?
Yeah. So during my PhD, basically my PhD was about new sensing modalities using photonic chips. So I was using photonic chips. Basically, our whole research group is using photonic chips, or a lot of them. And those were very powerful for, as we found out, as some people before me found out, that you could do good sensing with them. And then we focused on, okay, how can we decrease the costs? Because for these kind of chips, you would need large systems, large optical systems. So, you would be going to the lab. And then we figured out we could decrease the cost of the readout of these sensing chips. And like that, it moved towards this home diagnostic proposition. But indeed, initially we were working just on sensing systems during my PhD.
But sensing systems potentially can be used to apply to any topic, almost any industry.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm,
So initially, it's very industry. It's just a sensing system that can sense a biomarker, let's say, in a liquid sample. That is
mm,
really the basis. So it could be
okay.
used in industrial sensing, in aquaculture, in foods, in veterinarian. We moved towards medical, but exactly the biosensing is a liquid biopsy or liquid biosensing.
So yes, the range of applications is just huge.
Yeah, the
So
range is huge, indeed. Really on a really basic proposition level, it's about decreasing the cost of high quality
mm,
analysis, keeping
yeah,
the quality but making it cheaper, and that
yeah.
is useful in many applications.
Mm,
Um, so we have a big B2B proposition because of that, right? We make tests for other people in various settings, pharma or other diagnostic companies. And there's one product we make ourselves, which is the self-test for STDs. Yeah.
okay. Sam, coming back to the origins of Meep. So you have you are a co-founder. So
Mhm.
you started with someone else. What's the profile of the other co-founder? He used to
So
work with you before, I guess.
yeah, yeah, indeed. Ruben van Roosbroek is the other founder. He has a background in surface chemistry and in assay development. So
Mm,
technically, let's say he is actually the technical lead of the company because the hardware is more or less finished. So now
mhm,
if you make a test, it's all about biology and chemistry. And that's where he comes from. He comes from the life science side and then specifically has a lot of experience on building these biological assays on silicon substrates, which is what we do. And I come more from the engineering side, let's say. And so together it's a good match.
mm. So which year did you start Meep?
Meep was founded last year, so we're just a
Mhm,
year and a half old.
mhm.
Um, yeah,
Okay. And before Meep, so you worked for another company for several years.
yeah, indeed. Actually, the Meep is quite young, but the technology is already a bit more mature, let's say.
Mhm,
So, we started in 2016, 2017 at university. We spun out of the university,
mhm,
and then at that point, the project was under a different company, which was called MyCartis. And then it
mhm,
spun out of MyCartis, and we founded Antelope Diagnostics, which is the company I founded. And then we grew the technology under that context. But that was in the middle of the pandemic. And then so we switched to
mm,
COVID sensing with this technology. And that in the end led to the selling of the technology, and uh, Meep bought it, and that's the new startup. So I'd say there's a lot of, you
mm.
know,
But
uh,
throughout the various steps
yeah,
you went since your PhD, I
yeah,
understand you always worked on the same technologies.
correct. Yeah. So I was there from the after the PhD, and then the various corporate steps you can say, two
Mm,
companies, and now Meep. Yeah.
okay. And so when you came up last year with the idea and the foundation of Meep, what was your vision for Meep when you started? Was it significantly different from the vision you have today, or is it exactly the same?
I think initially when we started off with this technology and we were doing home sensing, I think we had more the idea that um, families could have this device and they could be a lot of tests, like a home device for any type of tests.
Hmm,
That was like kind of a dream, let's say. But I think
okay,
we
yes.
we realized that it's not that easy to do that, and actually it's maybe better to build products.
Hmm,
You need a special way to get in the market, to get in the whole market, and that's going to be for a specific client. So in our sense, is this young sexually active person So then you really make a product for that person, and I think that's a bit of a shift going from really putting your platform in the market to a specific product.
And so, how did you secure the initial resources, or did you look for some sort of funding to get the company off the ground?
Yeah, we are operating. We did a small FFF round, as they call it, friends,
Mhm.
families, and pools. We have a client that we're working for, so somebody's paying us to develop an assay for them. That gives us some profit as well, and then we have a grant. So those three pillars give us what we need to go forward.
Yeah. Okay. And so, how would you summarize the journey of Meep since you started? What were the main milestones, let's say, in this journey?
I think, well, really from Meep, from the young company, let's say, I think one of the milestones that we recently had is, of course, the technology was already quite advanced since we bought it from Antelope, right? But we were, let's say, we were lacking a real validation by a client or by an external party. And recently we successfully finished the project for a large pharma client, where we could really show in a clinical context with our technology versus the clinical standards that we could show the same clinical specs in terms of sensitivity and in terms of accuracy as what they use in the clinics. And that's of course very nice that you see, and that somebody else basically validates this based on their samples is a powerful next step for us.
Yeah, that's so. Today, I understand you're still at the prototype stage. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's indeed it's a prototype that we have. So we're not on the market. We have a prototype, a demonstrator, if you will. Yeah. I can show it to you if you want.
Yeah. If you can show us a picture at some stage, it will make it more clear for the viewers. And so, but what's the business model you have in mind? So you intend to manufacture the device yourself, or probably you intend to outsource the manufacturing of the device?
Yeah, so indeed, so this is basically it. This is the prototype. So you see a readout, a small reader. That's a reusable thing, so that you use it for any type of test. If you would have multiple tests, the reader is always the same. And then you have on the bottom, you see the test. That's the cartridge, and there is the photonic chip inside. And then it's the smartphone indeed that guides you through it. And we don't do any manufacturing in house. So everything you see here is made by other parties, by basically subcontractors. And that allows us to really focus on what we do best, which is making these biological products or these assays or these tests on top of our hardware. So the hardware is what it is, and now it's really test development, clinical phasing, understanding the markets, and that's really our core. And then the manufacturing is done by other people.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, and so one important point, because it's not intuitive at all. Can you explain us the link between light and detecting diseases? How is it possible that you can detect a disease using light? That was the mystery when I discovered Meep. That was a mystery for me. Huh?
So you can, actually, generally speaking, with light, you can do many detection principles, but specifically for us, the reader shines light on this photonic chip. So you see the chip in the small thing in the middle of the cartridge.
Also, that's the chip.
Yeah, the chip is there in the middle. It's just a few millimeters by a few millimeters. It's very, very small. You shine light on the chip, light couples in these waveguide structures, and a waveguide is just like a photonic wire. So it's just something that concentrates the light, and then you can make circuitry. Like you have a copper wire that concentrates electrons.
That's more or less like an optical fiber.
Yeah, it's like an optical fiber, but then on top of a silicon substrate, on top of a chip, and smaller. But it does this. It's the same principle. It guides light, but it's smaller. And what you do is you can make different type of sensors with these wires, and then on top of these sensors, we have a bioprinter, and we spot bioreceptor molecules like an antibody on top of one of the sensors. So we can spot a different one. That's why we can detect many different things with the same test, because sensors on the chip detect something different. And so what happens if your sample flows over the surface of the chip, and let's say for a chlamydia test, if there's a chlamydia bacteria in the sample, then basically this antibody, or this on top of the wire, captures the chlamydia, and this construct becomes heavier, right? Because you capture.
So it will react. It will create a reaction.
Yeah, it creates a reaction. It's just an affinity reaction. It just binds to it. It just gets immobilized. It gets stuck, and then the light which is going through the waveguide continuously, when this bacteria binds onto it, the wire is a bit heavier, let's say, and the light feels it. The light will go a little bit slower, and it's actually this change in speeds that we can detect through our optical circuitry, very, very, very sensitively, and they call it refractive index sensing.
But so this change of light is this signature, if you want, is unique and is due to the reaction of the sensor with the disease, basically.
Well, yes and no. Let's say the light which is going in the waveguide doesn't know what happens.
Yeah.
So there's no specific. You also have spectroscopy, and in spectroscopy, there a specific molecule or a specific bond has a specific feature in your light graph. But here, the light which goes through the waveguide just knows the waveguide just got a bit heavier. And so the selective feature is really the biological receptor molecule, which makes sure that you only capture what you want to capture and not something else. And then the light knows as soon as something is captured, it will go slower. And then okay, on this sensor, we capture something, so it must be chlamydia.
Okay, but then I understand it implies that the reliability of the detection is close to 100%.
It depends on how good your chemistry is as well, right? Because if your chemistry on your waveguide captures something else, the light will also get a signal. And so that's really where a lot of our development has gone into, in making this chemistry super, super reliable. So you have no background, we call it, and you only detect what you want to detect. But so it's really a nice interplay between the photonics and the chemistry and the biology to make sure that we don't have false positive signals, basically, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
That's what you want to avoid, yeah. Obviously, yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the company itself. It's beyond the technology. So you're still located in Belgium, in Ghent. If I'm correct.
Yeah, we have our labs are in Ghent. So we have labs, wet labs, and offices, clinical labs in Ghent.
Yeah, and so I think you told us, but you are 6 today working for
Five.
Meep. Oh, 5, sorry.
5.
So what's the typical profile of someone working for Meep today?
Yeah, so because we really work on this interface between physics, engineering, biology, I think the people who work for us they reflect this. So I have a clinical person who is doing more sales or more business development. We have 2 people, really biologists, who develop these assays. Actually, we have 2 clinical people and 2 biologists, and then myself.
Yeah. Okay. And do you think there is such a thing as a corporate culture at Meep? And if so, how would you describe it?
Well, you know, the funny thing about Meep is that the 2 founders, myself and Ruben, we both became a father really close to the moment where we founded the company. And so our daughters are just 2 weeks apart. And that's also where the name comes from, Meep. His daughter is called Merle, and the mine is Paulina, Meep. So, you know, but in any case, you know, when you have a small kid, it's we just value efficiency and prioritization a lot, right? Because, you know, if you need to pick her up at the daycare at 5:30, then that's it, and you better be ready. So it's we try to bring that across as well. I think it's something that everybody does here. And other than that, you know, this work should be fun as well. So we try to make it a bit light. We go cycling as a team every now and then we climb the local Flanders hills and make it like a team activity. Just, you know, fun things to do.
And so I assume that since you created the company, the prototype has gone through a few different versions. So you had to change it quite regularly. That's my assumption. But when you are into a field which involves so much technology, you've probably made several changes to the prototype.
Yeah. Well, actually, I brought an old prototype with me here, so maybe that's fun. You know, I could just show it on the camera. You know, it used to look
So
like
that's
this.
an early version.
That's an
Yeah.
earlier version, and it also looks nice. You know, it fits in your hand. And what the funny thing about this prototype is that when we did usability studies, so when people they come to our office and then they use the prototypes and we observe them and we see if they will not do things wrong, because if individuals are starting to do medical testing, we need to make sure they do it right. And we notice, because this one is wobbly, if the people they like to hold it in their hands. So you do the test and then they walk around with thing in their hand, and that's not very good. And so the fact that it was so easy to hold in your hand and so round, we had to change the design and make it flat so people would put it on the table and leave it alone. And it's just, I just like this example, because indeed, you know, the technology development is so heavy and so strong, and then in the end, you notice that my design, I need to change it because of human behavior and usability. So that also comes into play.
Yeah, that was a surprise, I guess.
Yeah, indeed.
And so, but when it comes to the business models, so just to make sure I understand properly, so your plan is to sell the device to pharmacies, or are you going to sell it through some distribution company? What's you, well, do you have, I assume that you have ideas regarding
Yeah.
how you would get to the market.
Yeah, it's basically we think it works well. If I'm talking about the STDs, the STD brand, this is all about anonymity, right? So people are also looking for solutions online. They are a bit embarrassed, you know, it's very complicated, it's intimate, and so they look online. And so we think having a good online presence is very important, like a typical e-commerce B2C product. With a good branding and a good messaging and explaining really well how it works, right? Because that's what people are looking for. And apart from that, indeed, retail, pharmacies is also an element for us, where you buy a pregnancy test, or where you buy a morning after pill, perhaps, or, you know, this is of course happening in a pharmacy, and then we work together with pharmacies and with big distributors to get in there. Yeah.
And so how much so I'm not sure we mentioned this already, but how much would the device cost for the end user?
So let's say a first test, because actually, there's quite some people who do multiple testing in this context as well. It's not always just one test and then it's done. So first test, let's say we would charge 100 euros. So that's the reader and the test together.
Test number one. Okay.
Yeah, and then of course you have the reader, you can reuse it later, and then just the test is like 40.
Oh, okay, so any additional test would be 40 euros.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay. And so I understand the way it works is it works with an app, a mobile phone app. So you have to, when you buy the device, you also have to download an app on Android or Apple, and you use it with your phone, basically.
Yeah. So use it with your phone. So what you do is when you do a test, you take your phone, you scan the pouch of the tests so that the reader and the cloud knows what test it is about.
Yeah. Mm.
You take your sample, you put it in the test, you put it in the reader, and then later the results appear on your phone. So you need an internet connection to do a test. And we think it's really important because that way we can give the correct interpretation to the results. We can explain people what is chlamydia, what is gonorrhea, because not everybody knows, of course. So you can really put people at ease and also give them a link to care. If it's positive, of course you want them to get treated, and so you have to make that as easy as possible, and that's all where the platform and the app comes in.
So here we are talking about health and personal data. So how did you approach the issue of protecting private health data and making sure that they don't get lost?
That's a big
in the
point.
cloud.
Indeed, that's a big point. There's things like GDPR, right? You need to make sure that the data is anonymized. There's a whole different set of rules which govern what you need to do if you make a medical device that comprises out of data, so that the data is always integer and is always protected. Data security, data integrity, that's all very, very regulated. So we need to make sure, because the data basically flows from the reader to the phone, to the cloud, back to the phone. So there's a lot of links, and all those links you need to really protect really well, so nobody can come in and look at the data, steal the data, etc. So yeah, that requires a lot of IT developments. And then very specific for our case is the anonymity, right? Somebody who does a self-test for STDs is in a moment where he wants to be private and anonymous. So you need to make sure the data is his, and you don't, and it stays his. And only if the user says so or gives you the option, then you can give it to a clinician, but only with consent of the user, of course. So that's very important.
So on another topic related to technology, did you protect some parts of your device with patents?
Yeah, it's quite heavily protected with IP, with patents. Indeed, those patents are also global. Because we have a strong academical trajectory. Some patents were already discovered at Ghent University. Some patents were discovered later. So patents is like a building block. You start with the first, and you build things on top to make it as strong as possible to defend your startup, basically.
Yeah. So maybe a few words on the future. So how much time do you think it's going to take you to move from prototype to the mass market? When do you plan to launch?
Yeah, so really commercial launch is planned for 2026. So that's still 2-3 years from now. And next year is all about basically going from this prototype that we have now to a manufacturable version of this. really. So setting up, we have already a lot of the manufacturing processes have been developed, but those are in our lab, so we need to bring them to our subcontractors, make sure it's scalable or it's repeatable. So that will take time. And then after that, it's the clinical trials, because to put this medical device on the market, those are very heavy tests you need to do to show that you reach clinical sensitivity, clinical specificity, and that can be 2,000 to 4,000 patients. So that also takes easily a year.
Wow.
So even though you could say the prototype is ready, the technology works, yes, but it's still at least 2 years for these elements, because it's a medical.
No, but that it's I guess it applies to many startups in the health industry, but it probably means that you will have to raise additional money at some stage in the coming 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, correct. We want to do a next capital round of around 7 million by the end of 2024.
Oh, so it's well in 1 year. So that's very soon.
Yeah,
wow.
Indeed.
Okay. So where would you, when the day you launch on the market, so where do you think you would start? Which country?
So we will probably do a trial, a pilot in Belgium before the launch. So that will be next year or in the next 18 months. And then we would like to roll out in the UK and in US.
Okay.
UK because the prevalence is higher, right? And US is, I think, home testing and people testing their medical conditions at home is just a little bit more mature, the proposition. So yeah.
But each time you launch, you will launch in a new country, you need to go through specific clinical trials in each country.
Yeah, that's where the clinical or the regulatory strategy comes in. The benefit, of course, of doing US is that you have one market, you do one regulatory trajectory, and then it works. And then in Europe, you have also a unified. You need an IVD certificate, but in Europe the rules are changing. We're going from an IVD-D to an IVD-R. So it's a new set of rules, and it's taking slower in Europe because of the new rules. So we see many companies changing their strategy to US first because it goes faster now, but maybe the backlog will clear up a little bit in the next year. So we're just keeping a very close eye on that. You even see some European countries who are following the US rules because of that problem. So it's really changing at the moment. So yeah, we need to watch it closely.
So assuming you launch focusing on STDs, the STDs we mentioned, for maybe a longer future, such as 5 years or 10 years, do you have plans to expand your technology, to apply your technology to other diseases?
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, we hope we have a good product with this STDs. Going from there, we think about other things, because the STDs it's initially a product for women, because of the clinical consequences is mainly there. So then we're looking at fertility, we're looking at trying to conceive, we're looking at other things in that same environment. If you want to have a baby, what do you need to test once you have the baby? Fetal health, maternal health, these kind of elements. And apart from that, let's say more general, yeah, we're looking at really chronic diseases as well. So really clinical cases of people who have a chronic disease who need regular follow-up, is of course something that matches well with the product, and that's still something that we are scanning now.
Okay. So maybe 2 or 3 questions. Looking back at your experience as an entrepreneur, so what would be, if I ask you, what was the biggest challenge you had to overcome during these years as entrepreneur? What would come first?
Well, very recently we Meep bought the technology from Antelope. So this is like a management buyout, and that was quite challenging, because you start up a new venture, a new team, a new lab, and it's a bit in a bootstrapped way, right? So you put all of your own money on the line, so you're really committed, the money of your family, etc. So it's kind of scary that a lot of you're in it very deeply. So yeah, that's challenging, but okay, we try to be pragmatic about it and really analyze what is the best way to move forward. So yeah, I think that was the biggest challenge so far.
Yeah. And if I ask you what was the most useful skill you had during your years as entrepreneurs, which one would you mention?
Yeah, I think what's yeah, it's always difficult to talk about that about yourself, I guess. But what kind of matters or helps is being, of course, a bit perseverant. You have your idea and your vision, and you try to stick by it. If not, otherwise, every new opinion turns you another way. You keep on tolling. But on the same time, you need to be super critical and super self-critical about your own proposition and analyze, because you will hear it 10 times, 100 times, it's not going to work, right? So you need to think, okay, what can I take from this? How can I implement this? What is true? What are the assumptions that is underlying this critique, for example, and how can I be better? So it's really about thinking about your own proposition, but being a bit perseverance. Those are like 2 contradicting things, but still, I think it's both very necessary to move forward, right?
So maybe as a final question, so if you were to meet a young entrepreneur who just created his or her startup, what would you tell him or her? What advice would you give him or her?
Yeah, I'm of course coming from let's say the deep tech or the really technology front, right? Academical, physics, etc. And so I guess I can relate most to people in that same setting. And then I think it's really helpful to kind of, as a tech developer, sometimes let go of your technology and look at the problem and look at the user and talk to your user, and not develop your technology on and on and on and on, but really try to understand what is the problem you're solving. And maybe sometimes different features or different elements are way more important for your customer than hard technical features like sensitivity, for example. I'm just saying something. Maybe they value more anonymity, which is okay, but how do I do that? So yeah, I would really get out there and talk to your users. It's evident and you hear it a lot, but it's really important.
But it's not intuitive. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, voilà, indeed. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I suggest we stop it here. Thank you so much, Jan-Willem, for sharing your insight. I wish you and Meep the best for the coming years. But I'm sure you will do great, whether it's in the US or in Europe. And I really wish you the best. Thank you again.
All right. Thanks, Bernard. I had a good time. Thanks.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.